Renaissance, the moment Europe woke up. Imagine this for a moment. It's the late 1300s, and Europe feels like a world that has forgotten how to breathe. The streets are quiet in a way that's almost unnatural. Entire villages stand half empty, doors hanging open as if the people inside simply vanished overnight. In a sense, they did. The Black Death didn't just kill millions, it carved a hole into the heart of Europe. Farmers abandoned their fields. Priests couldn't bury the dead fast enough, and the people who survived lived with a kind of dull fear, the kind that stays in your bones even after the danger is gone. But let's zoom in, because not everywhere is frozen in despair. There's a city tucked between the rolling hills of Tuscany, a place that somehow refuses to die quietly. Florence, picture it. Narrow stone streets, lanterns flickering in the early dusk, merchants yelling prices in a dozen different dialects. It's chaotic, crowded, even dirty, but it's alive. More alive than almost anywhere else in Europe. And right here, in this noisy, stubborn city, something unusual is beginning to happen. There's a new class, rising, merchants. These aren't nobles with fancy titles. They're bankers, traders, businessmen who made their fortune through risk, not inheritance. And they're hungry for status, hungry for beauty, hungry to create something that lasts beyond a ledger book and a pile of coins. One family in particular stands out, the Medici. They're not powerful yet, not really, but they're determined. Their banking empire is growing, and with each loan, each deal, their influence spreads a little further across the city. But wealth alone isn't the story here. The real shift is happening inside people's minds. After centuries of survival, something new begins to take root. Curiosity. People start asking questions again. Dangerous questions. What if we understood how the body works? What if we looked at the world the way the ancient Greeks once did? What if life is more than suffering, praying, and waiting for heaven? Walk into a small workshop near the Arno River and you might find a young apprentice sketching the human body, not as a religious symbol, but as a marvel of design. Step into a library and you'll see scholars rediscovering old texts that had been forgotten for 1,000 years. The city is buzzing in a way that's subtle but unmistakable, like the low hum of a storm building just beyond the horizon. And what's maybe the most fascinating part? Florence doesn't realize what it's becoming. To the people living there, it probably just feels like daily life. Merchants bargaining, wool weavers working late into the night, young artists copying ancient sculptures as practice. But when you pull back and look at the bigger picture, something is undeniably shifting. Europe, a continent that had spent centuries looking backward, to tradition, to the church, to the afterlife, is beginning to turn its gaze forward. We're standing at the edge of the Middle Ages, the edge of a long, dark tunnel that's about to open into a burst of color, sound, and discovery that the world hasn't seen in over 1,000 years. And the first spark, tiny, fragile, but powerful, is right here in Florence, a spark that will ignite a rebirth, a renaissance. If you were to travel across Europe in the early 1400s, you would notice something surprising. After decades of darkness, certain cities were glowing with energy. It was not the glow of peace or comfort. It was the glow of movement, trade, opportunity, and ambition. Let's take a journey through three of the most important places: Venice, Florence, and Bruges. Start with Venice. Imagine approaching the city from the sea. The air smells like salt and spices. Tall ships glide across the water filled with silk from China, pepper from India, glassware crafted by Venetian masters, and maps drawn by explorers who have seen the edges of the known world. The city feels like a living marketplace where every alleyway leads to another negotiation, another deal, another whisper of wealth. Move west and you arrive in Florence. The city feels different from Venice, less focused on the sea and more connected to the land and to money itself. Banks here do not just store wealth, they create it. Promissory notes, loans, interest rates. These ideas might feel normal today, but back then they were revolutionary. And no one understood this better than the Medici family. Picture their banking house, clerks hunched over ledgers, messengers running in and out with contracts, coins being weighed, counted, sorted. The Medici are becoming the financial engine of Europe, and they know it. But money is only half the story. What truly sets them apart is what they decide to do with that money. They begin to fund artists, not because they love art, because art is power. In a world where buildings are crowded and cities are noisy, a beautiful sculpture in a public square speaks louder than any banner. A well-painted fresco inside a chapel says more about prestige than any speech. The Medici understand this. If a family can shape the look and feel of a city, they can shape its soul. Now let's head north to Bruges in modern Belgium. At first glance it looks calm with its canals and quiet streets, but make no mistake, Bruges is booming. Wool from England, fabric from Flanders, silver from Germany, and luxury goods from Italy flow through this small but powerful city. Merchants here speak 5 or 6 languages. Deals are made across tables covered in parchment and sealed with wax stamps that signify every corner of Europe. And here is the important thing. All three cities share a common spirit, a spirit of rising ambition. For centuries, Europe was controlled almost entirely by nobles and the church. Power came from land or from religious authority. But in these cities, a new group is taking shape. Merchants, bankers, traders, people whose influence comes from movement and money rather than bloodline. Their power does not come from swords. It comes from ships, from accounting books, from connections stretching across thousands of miles. And as their influence grows, something else grows with it. A desire to be remembered. That desire becomes the fuel for a cultural transformation. Merchants begin to sponsor artists and scholars. They pay for public works that make their city more beautiful. They collect books, they build libraries, they support architects who want to reintroduce symmetry and harmony inspired by ancient Rome. They hire painters who push beyond the old medieval style into something deeper, more emotional, more human. Walk through Florence at this time and you can almost feel the tension in the air. Not the tension of fear, but the tension of potential. It is like the city is holding its breath, waiting for something incredible to happen. Workshops are overflowing with apprentices. Studios echo with the sound of chisels striking marble. Scholars debate ideas from ancient Greece that had been forgotten for 1,000 years. And the question begins to whisper across Europe. What if life can be more than survival? What if beauty and knowledge matter? What if human creativity has no limits? This is the beginning of a new era, a cultural pressure cooker. A collision of money, ambition, curiosity, and opportunity. The Middle Ages focused on faith and tradition. But the world that is emerging now focuses on possibility. Trade does not just move goods, it moves ideas. And ideas are about to transform Europe in ways no one could have imagined. In Venice, in Bruges, and especially in Florence, the stage is now set. The actors are stepping into the light. The money is flowing, and the hunger for meaning and legacy is stronger than ever. The Renaissance is no longer just a spark, it is beginning to spread. Let me take you into a room in Florence. It's small, cluttered, flooded with soft morning light. Papers cover the tables. Charcoal sketches spill across the floor, and right in the middle sits a young apprentice with a face full of quiet determination. His name is Leonardo da Vinci. Before he becomes a legend, before the world tries to turn him into a myth, he is simply a curious mind trapped inside the body of an ordinary young man. He watches everything. The way a bird folds its wings before it takes off. The way water curls and twists when it spills from a jug. The way shadows change the shape of a human face. Nothing escapes him. Walk with him through Florence and you will notice how often he stops, not for people, but for details. A pattern on a butterfly's wing, a gear in a clock tower, a broken piece of marble lying on the street. Leonardo collects these small moments like other people collect coins, and he stores them inside his imagination where they begin to grow into ideas the world has never seen before. Step into his workshop in the evening. A candle burns on the table. The room smells like oil paint and metal shavings. On one side, sketches of flying machines hang from the wall. On another, diagrams of muscles and bones. And in the corner sits an unfinished painting that he wipes his hands on every time he walks past it. He is not satisfied. He may never be. Leonardo is not the only genius in Florence. Across the city, another young artist is wrestling with a giant block of marble. Hammer, chisel, echo after echo in the workshop. Everything about him is intense. His concentration, his pride, his passion. His name is Michelangelo. That block of marble was considered useless, too tough, too narrow, too flawed for any real sculptor. But Michelangelo sees something hidden beneath the stone. People tease him for being obsessive, but he knows exactly what he is looking for. He once said that he does not carve the statue. He simply removes the stone around it to let the figure escape. Imagine the moment his sculpture of David finally stands under the daylight, a perfect balance of power and tension. Muscles carved with unbelievable precision, a face calm but ready. A young man facing a giant. Florence had never seen anything like it. And then there is Botticelli, a painter whose mind dances between religion and mythology. He paints women who look like they are stepping out of the sea, gods walking on air, scenes filled with movement so gentle that the canvas seems to breathe. His work reminds people that art does not have to be chained to the church. It can be beautiful for the sake of beauty itself. But here is the real magic. These geniuses did not appear out of nowhere. They grew from the soil that Florence created, a city full of patrons willing to pay for talent, a culture that rewards curiosity, a hunger to outshine the past and redefine the future. And in this environment, surrounded by competition and opportunity, something extraordinary happens. Artists begin to push each other. The pressure becomes fuel. The city becomes a forge. Picture this. One day, Leonardo walks past a sculpture by Michelangelo and pauses. He does not say a word, but inside his mind, gears begin to turn faster. That silent rivalry pushes him deeper into his craft. Meanwhile, Michelangelo sees a painting by Leonardo and feels a familiar sting, a mix of admiration and challenge. It drives him to carve something even more incredible. They never work together, but in a strange way they build each other. This is the essence of the Renaissance. Not just talent, not just opportunity, but a perfect storm of curiosity, ambition, rivalry, support, and belief. Florence becomes a place where a boy with a sketchbook can grow into a scientist, where a stonecutter can turn marble into emotion, where a painter can resurrect ancient myths and set them free on a canvas. Genius does not rise alone, it rises in clusters. It rises in cities where ideas collide. And in the early 1400s, Florence is the brightest cluster the world has ever seen. By the early 1500s, the Renaissance was no longer just about art, it was about curiosity, experimentation, and the courage to challenge what everyone thought they knew. People began to ask questions that had once been unthinkable, and some of those questions would change the world forever. Imagine a scholar in a quiet room. Paper strewn across a table, quills broken from constant writing, eyes scanning the stars. His name is Nicolaus Copernicus. For years he has been observing the sky, plotting the movement of planets. What he sees does not match what people have always believed. The Earth is not the center of the universe. In fact, it is one planet among many, orbiting the sun. He knows that revealing this idea could be dangerous. The Church holds the authority over what is considered true, yet Copernicus cannot ignore the evidence. He works in silence, day after day, until finally, he writes it down. His thoughts will circulate slowly at first, but eventually, they will shake the very foundations of science. And then there is Galileo Galilei, a man with restless eyes and an insatiable need to observe. He takes a small telescope, not much more than a tube with glass, and points it at the night sky. What he sees astounds him. Jupiter has moons orbiting it, proof that the heavens are not as rigid as anyone believed. The moon is not a perfect sphere. The universe is far more complex and beautiful than humans have imagined. Picture Galileo standing on a balcony at night, sketchbook in hand. The wind chills his fingers. He notes every crater, every shadow, every irregularity. Each discovery brings excitement, but also fear, because he knows that challenging the established view can be dangerous. Powerful people consider questioning the cosmos a crime. Yet he cannot stop. He must look, must record, must understand. This is the spirit of the Renaissance in science. A mix of curiosity and courage. A willingness to explore even when the path is uncertain. These men are not just observing the world, they are rewriting it in their minds and daring others to do the same. Science begins to spread its wings. Mathematics, astronomy, anatomy, and physics all find new ground. People start to look at the world not only as a reflection of God's will, but also as a system that can be understood, predicted, and even improved. And what is fascinating is how interconnected everything becomes. An artist studies human anatomy to make his figures more realistic. A scientist studies perspective to make his drawings precise. Curiosity feeds curiosity, knowledge feeds knowledge, and suddenly the world is alive with ideas. Florence may be the cradle of art, but the Renaissance is becoming a laboratory. The universe itself is a subject waiting to be explored. Every observation is a discovery. Every measurement is a step toward understanding. And slowly, humanity begins to realize that it is capable of asking questions that have no immediate answers. Questions that could change everything. By looking outward into the stars and inward into the human body, Renaissance thinkers begin to see that the world is larger, stranger, and more beautiful than anyone had imagined. And the courage to ask the question, to observe, and to record is what will define this age. The Middle Ages emphasized faith and obedience. The Renaissance emphasizes curiosity and courage. And in this tension, in this collision between old beliefs and new observations, the modern world is quietly being born. By the mid-1500s, something extraordinary is happening across Europe. Cities feel different, people talk differently, ideas travel faster than ever before. And at the heart of all this change is a simple but powerful belief that human beings matter. Their thoughts, their emotions, their hopes, and their fears deserve attention. This belief is called humanism, and it becomes the engine driving a new wave of art and culture. Picture Florence once again. Not the crowded marketplace or the grand cathedral, but a quiet studio lit by soft morning light. A young painter sits in front of a blank panel. He is not thinking about saints floating in the clouds or divine visions of heaven. He is thinking about people, real people. Faces filled with imperfections, hands that show age and work, eyes that reflect dreams and doubts. He wants to paint humanity as it is, not as legends say it should be. This shift is subtle but powerful. Artists begin to study anatomy, not just for scientific curiosity, but to bring life into their work. Sculptors carve muscles and veins as if their statues might breathe at any moment. Writers stop focusing solely on religious texts and start exploring human desires, politics, relationships, and the messy complexity of everyday life. In Venice, the air carries the scent of salt and paint. Canvases dry by open windows as gondolas drift through canals. Here, art becomes rich and emotional, colors grow deeper, shadows grow softer. Painters like Titian play with light in a way that feels almost alive. You can look at one of his portraits and feel the heartbeat of the person staring back at you. Humanism transforms not only how people make art, but how they see themselves. Suddenly, being human is no longer something to apologize for, it is something to celebrate. People begin to believe that learning, beauty, and self-discovery are not luxuries, they are essential parts of life. libraries grow, schools expand, and the idea of studying the world for its own sake becomes normal. This cultural wave spreads beyond Italy. In England, playwrights begin exploring the depths of human emotion. The stage becomes a mirror of the human heart. Love, jealousy, ambition, betrayal, hope, all of it is laid bare in a way that audiences have never seen before. The world is no longer divided neatly between good and evil. Characters become complicated and painfully real. And through all of this, a quiet question begins to rise in the background. What does it mean to be human? To think, to create, to feel? And why do those things matter? Humanism does not reject religion. It simply shifts the gaze. Instead of looking upward for every answer, people begin to look inward. They study their own minds, their own relationships, their own stories. They believe that human life has dignity and value, and that belief will eventually shape politics, science, philosophy, and education for centuries to come. Imagine standing in a Renaissance workshop. You hear the scratch of charcoal on paper, the soft rhythm of a sculptor's chisel, the pages of a book fluttering as a student reads. The world feels alive, everything feels possible. And for the first time in a long time, people believe the future can be shaped by human hands. Art is no longer just decoration. It becomes a message, a reflection, a reminder that every person, regardless of status or wealth, carries a story worth telling. This is what makes the Renaissance so powerful. It is not just the paintings or the sculptures or the plays. It is the rediscovery of humanity itself. A moment when people realize that the human mind is capable of greatness, that creativity is a form of courage, and that beauty is something to be pursued, not feared. The world is waking up, and in the glow of this cultural rebirth, the foundations of the modern human spirit are being written. Imagine walking through a European city in the late 1400s. The streets are still narrow and dusty. Merchants shout, horses pull carts, and the smell of bread drifts from a nearby bakery. On the surface, nothing seems unusual, but inside a small workshop tucked between two houses, something world-changing is quietly taking shape. A man sits beside a wooden machine. The air smells of ink and metal. His hands are stained black. He places small blocks of carved letters into a frame, checks the alignment, then presses them onto a sheet of paper with steady force. When he lifts the press, a page appears, crisp, clean, identical to the one before it, and the one after it. This man is Johannes Gutenberg, and the world he lives in is about to be transformed forever. Before this moment, books were rare treasures. Every page had to be written by hand, one letter at a time. A single book could take years to finish. Only the wealthy and the powerful could afford them. Knowledge moved slowly. Ideas spread like whispers. A page here, a story there, carried by travelers or scholars who wandered from city to city. But the printing press changes everything. Suddenly, one person can create hundreds of pages in the time it used to take to write a single sheet. Books become cheaper, knowledge becomes faster, ideas become dangerous, because when ideas move quickly, they cannot be controlled. In the years that follow, workshops begin buzzing with activity. You can hear the repetitive thump of wooden presses echoing down cobblestone streets. Ink dries on long lines of paper hanging from wooden beams. Workers carry stacks of fresh books through crowded markets. And for the first time in history, ordinary people can own a book of their own. Imagine the reaction of someone who has never held a book before. Their hands tremble a little, their eyes widen. They turn the pages slowly, like they are handling something sacred, because in a way they are. A book is no longer a privilege. It is a doorway, a bridge connecting them to places they will never visit and people they will never meet. And it is not just books that spread. Pamphlets, letters, maps, diagrams, plays, scientific notes, philosophical arguments, stories of faraway lands. All of it begins to move across Europe like a rising tide. Students read faster. Scholars argue louder. Printers work longer hours. And with every page that rolls out of a press, the world becomes just a little more connected. Ideas that once belonged to a few now belong to many. Humanist writings travel from Italy to France, England, and beyond. Scientific discoveries jump from one mind to another. Artists and thinkers can share their visions across borders without ever leaving their homes. And within just a few decades, Europe becomes a living network of conversations. Of course, not everyone is comfortable with this change. Some leaders fear that books might spread ideas that challenge old beliefs, that too much knowledge in the hands of ordinary people might lead to questions. But questions are exactly what the Renaissance is built on. Curiosity is no longer a sin. It is a spark that drives society forward. Standing inside a printing workshop, you can feel the energy of the age. The press slams down. Workers move quickly. Papers rustle in stacks taller than a man. Ink stains the floor. The air hums with possibility. Every page that dries in the open air carries the potential to inspire someone miles away. Someone who might discover a new star, write a new poem, start a new revolution. Printing does not just spread knowledge, it spreads confidence. It tells people their thoughts matter. Their voices matter, that ideas are meant to be shared, challenged, debated, and rebuilt. In many ways, the printing press is the engine of the modern world. It breaks the silence of the Middle Ages. It lifts knowledge out of dusty libraries. It frees ideas from the grip of the powerful. And it places the future into the hands of readers everywhere. Europe is no longer a collection of isolated communities. It is becoming a continent of minds, thinking together, learning together, rising together. And with each turn of a freshly printed page, you can feel the momentum of history accelerating. By the time the 1600s arrive, Europe does not look like the continent from a century earlier. The dark, narrow world of the Middle Ages feels distant now. Something has shifted in the way people think, speak, and imagine the future. You can feel it in the streets, in the classrooms, in the art studios, in the homes of ordinary families. The Renaissance has done more than create beautiful paintings or clever inventions. It has changed the very shape of human thought. Imagine standing on a hill overlooking a growing city. The rooftops stretch farther than ever before. New buildings rise with careful geometry and balanced proportions. Windows are larger. Streets are cleaner. People carry books under their arms as they walk. Children play near fountains decorated with statues that look almost alive. The world feels open, bright, curious. Across Europe, curiosity becomes a way of life. People question how the universe works. They question how society should be governed. They question their place in the world. And these questions do not fade into the air. They grow, they spread, they lead to real change. Explorers set sail across oceans with maps that were printed just months earlier. They look for new lands, new trade routes, and new knowledge. Their journeys reshape the geography of the world. Suddenly, Europe is no longer the center of a closed universe. It is part of a global web of cultures and ideas. Goods, stories, discoveries, and challenges all flow back toward Europe, forcing people to rethink everything they thought they knew. In laboratories and workshops, scientists build on the ideas of earlier thinkers. They use mathematics, observation, and experimentation to uncover new truths. Telescopes point to the sky. Microscopes point to the invisible. The human body, once locked behind superstition, is now studied with precision and respect. Diseases become less mysterious. Medicine becomes more effective. The human lifespan begins to grow. At the same time, new political ideas begin to take root. People start wondering what makes a government fair, what gives leaders authority, whether ordinary citizens should have a say in how they are ruled. These thoughts will not fully bloom until later revolutions, but their seeds are planted right here during the Renaissance. Art continues to flourish, but now it evolves into something more personal. Painters explore emotion. Writers dive into the complexity of the human heart. Music shifts from simple patterns to rich harmonies that echo through churches and royal courts. Culture becomes a mirror that reflects both the triumphs and the struggles of being human. And while all of this is happening, the most powerful force of the Renaissance continues to work quietly in the background: the spread of knowledge. Thanks to printing, ideas move faster than armies. A discovery in one country becomes a breakthrough in another. A book written in one language gets translated into 5 more within a few years. The pace of learning changes. The pace of change itself accelerates. Think of the world before the Renaissance. A world where most people never traveled more than a few miles from their home. A world where books were rare and education was a privilege. A world where questioning old beliefs felt dangerous. Then compare it to the world after. A world filled with maps, books, discoveries, theories, artworks, and new ways of thinking. A world where curiosity is not punished but encouraged. A world where humans see themselves not as passive subjects but as creators of their own destiny. The Renaissance does not end in a single year. It does not close like a chapter in a history book. Instead, it fades slowly into the background as a new era rises, but its impact remains. Every scientific revolution, every political movement for human rights, every advancement in art and literature carries a trace of the Renaissance spirit. When you look around the modern world, you can still feel it. In the glow of a screen filled with information, in the libraries that welcome anyone to learn, in the belief that every individual life has value, in the sense that the future is something we are allowed to imagine and build. The Renaissance did not just change Europe, it changed the story of humanity. It taught us to ask questions, to explore, to create, to challenge the darkness with curiosity, and to believe that knowledge, beauty, and courage can push the world forward. In the end, the Renaissance is not just a period of history. It is a reminder of what happens when humanity decides to wake up. And when it does, everything becomes possible.